Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Cory O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Hellaway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Wednesday, February 27th, 2013, and this is episode number 58.
In this episode, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of responsive web design, Foursquare expanding their specials to Visa and Mastercard, App.net's new Freemium tier, and much more. It's one of those evenings, man. It's we're doing things a little bit later in the week, and it's been a busy week on my side. How about over there with you?
Yeah, same. Been busy. I actually got a chance to speak at the Social Media Club last night. That's why we had to delay this recording by a day, but it was a fun event. It was a panel about social media measurement and kind of what's going on in the world of measurement and potentially, areas for improvement and what companies large and small should be considering. And I thought the panel went really well. There was a nice vibe. Sometimes you either watch panels or participate in a panel where one person wants to dominate and there's not this sort of flow back and forth. But I thought that overall there seemed to be a nice sharing of ideas. Everybody got an equal chance to state their opinion, and I thought it went really well. I'll have to share a link if a video gets posted. I'll track that down and post that onto the SoLoMo Show Twitter account because I think it might be fun to check out. Any
predominant themes or takeaways after the discussion?
I think the big takeaway, especially when it comes to measurement, is that there's no cure-all. You can't just fire up some tool and consider everything measured, because a lot of it has to do with deciding what you're going to measure, deciding how you're going to report on that measurement, deciding what your goals and metrics are, putting tracking systems in place. So you can't just say, okay, well, now we're measuring, 5 things and consider it done. It's a lot of decision-making. It's a lot of linking in different parts of the company together. And then all that varies depending on the size of your company. So if you're a 10-person startup, the things that you're going to measure and how often you report are very different than if you're part of a 5,000-person or 50,000-person company and there's different divisions and people are needing different information. So it is a challenging area. It's something that a lot of companies are constantly trying to evolve and trying to get better at. So it was definitely an interesting discussion topic.
It ties back to folks in their ultimate search for ROI, right? And that's where the measurement comes into play. So I like hearing that you guys kind of revisited the common thing. Well, not so common thing, actually, likely, is that what you want to measure in the tool that you use depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish, right? And for whatever particular business. So it sounds like it was interesting. Sorry, I missed it, but now we're back in the saddle here for the show, and we got a few cool things to discuss. What are we jumping into here first?
So I think first up is going to be a deep dive into responsive web design, which is always an exciting topic. Kind of a newer topic. It emerged on the scene a year or two back, and there's been this ongoing debate: is responsive web design the future, or should we stick with applications and that sort of thing? So thought we'd cover basically what is responsive web design, start off with that, and then look a little bit at what the benefits of it are, and then maybe the pros and cons between responsive web design and specific applications when it comes to addressing mobile, because I think that's what a lot of companies are thinking about when they hear responsive web design and what the benefits might be. So Adam, maybe you could take us real quick through the basics of responsive web design, what it is, and why people should care about it.
It's in the industry term is responsive web design. And for anybody who is, for instance, talking to their design team or to an agency or something like that, they may use the term responsive web design as well. But really what it boils down to is mobile website design, mobile web design. There are some other elements to it that differentiate it from strictly taking a site that you have and converting it over to mobile. It really is a methodology using available tools, CSS and HTML and so on, and some other tricks here and there sometimes, and helping your site conform to the device that it's being looked on, strictly due to the size. What I mean by that is there's been a lot of tricks that, like detecting user agents in browsers and things like that, that help you understand what device specifically, whether somebody's looking at it on an Android, or they're looking at it on Windows Mobile, or they're looking at it on an iOS operating system or an iPad, iOS operating system for a smartphone, or the larger format iPad. And that really, in the end, doesn't quite matter as much as just simply what is the viewing area that is being provided at any given moment, and how should my site be viewed in this particular viewing area. So if you look at something like an iPad that is 1024 by 768, if you hold it in landscape, which is a fairly common, probably kind of the minimum resolution nowadays for desktop computers and laptops. Usually that starts off at that and goes higher. In the old days, it was, what was it, 800 by 600. But when you hold an iPad in portrait mode, tall, then obviously it switches to 768 by 1024, and you can miss out on the feeling of the site that you're looking at, because it'll end up bleeding off to the side and not fully fitting on the screen properly, or being sized. That's kind of the most minimal way to pay attention to your site, to get it to fit properly when you turn it to the portrait size on an iPad. But when you go to something like a mobile device, you also have these much larger format mobile devices, they're a little bit bigger than, say, what we were used to initially with an iPhone, like the Samsung Galaxy devices and others like that, that are a bit larger in size and screen size and so on. Then you go all the way down to kind of an iPhone, which is fairly skinny but a little bit taller. Instead of having to worry about building these websites on a per device basis per se, or paying attention to these individual resolutions, responsive design responds to it, similar to having, a cup of water, and each cup is shaped differently, and it sort of conforms to the shape of that cup. I think one of the other things to think about in the future of responsive design is that our browsers are going to be available on all kinds of other devices in the future. And we don't want to have to pay attention to building out websites that are specifically targeted towards, again, a particular device, as much as we want to think about, a particular shape, and let the browser detect what's going on and change accordingly. So for something like a car dashboard in the future, where something there may be a web browser in that, or even on a TV, or in some other high-end things, like there are refrigerators that have browsers as well. Not that I expect people to do a lot of web browsing per se on a refrigerator.
Well, I think the key is that it's adapting, right? So a lot of people think responsive web design is just a fancy way of taking a desktop website and making it work on a phone, but it's just adapting to that size. You could actually go in the other direction. So you could have your website blow up, and so that when you view it on a television, it still looks and still functions as you intended. And it's taking into account a lot of different things. So you can have images that adjust their size. You can have videos that adjust their size. You can actually have videos appear and disappear depending on what size screen you're viewing it on. There's even some technology that can adjust font sizes depending on the screen size that you're viewing it on. So I think the basic concept is that it adjusts the site, both the content of the site and the appearance of the site and the functionality of the site, even, to adapt it to the screen that you're viewing it on, to make the most of the specifics and the intricacies of each of those devices.
And so, and what you're saying is taking it a bit farther, right? Beyond just simply adapting the size, doing just that doesn't actually account for much in the overall approach. But thinking actually about the devices that people may be using it for, again, not about whether it's an Android or whether it's a Windows or whether it's an iPhone, but whether it's a smartphone device or a small device versus a large device, a tablet versus a desktop, that when you adjust those sizes, that you actually adjust, like you were saying, content accordingly. Do images scale properly between them? Does navigation adjust itself to make it easier to tap with a finger instead of using a mouse? one of the biggest things that people don't think about when it comes to kind of converting their site to a responsive site or thinking of creating a responsive site is how on their desktop they've got navigation that requires mousing over to reveal sub-navigation. And then suddenly they leave that as is for instance, a tablet user, again, which is not that much smaller than a 1024 by 768 sized screen. And then suddenly you're left trying to access content that can't be accessed because there is no such thing as a mouse over on touch-based devices. So being able to prioritize content accordingly for folks that may be looking at it in different mental modes when they're on other devices, and then also making sure that the user experience is optimized for the particular viewing size that you're on. So those folks that are looking at it, even for instance, on the go, versus sitting, again, behind a desktop or at home or something, can access information easily, but also potentially differently than folks that are looking at it on other sides. So this is, again, the same exact site, but it's being just simply displayed and adapting itself to the different environment so that those using it can easily access it and interface with it.
So that sounds fine. It makes sense logically, adapt your site to the device that it's being viewed on. But other than the idea that, okay, it's going to look best, what are the tangible benefits? Why would a company want to consider responsive web design over, say, just, we've adapted to the phone. We released an application that runs on iOS or it runs on Android, and now phone users can access our same content on the go. Why would a responsive design, what are the benefits of responsive design that wouldn't be addressed by something like an application?
Mobile SEO is going to be a big thing. I mean, we keep talking about this, but in the next year or so, mobile devices accessing the internet are going to surpass desktop devices. So those accessing the internet to search or for real-time information or for whatever it is that they're doing is going to be the most prominent on mobile devices, and that's going to continue to be the upward trend. And so when people search for information on the mobile web, you're now creating kind of a wall between what would be your desktop site and the information available to those folks, and then something like an application, which would then kind of, in a way, be partitioned off from things like standard web search, for one thing. Also, another thing is that when people are accessing your let's say they're reading an article or they're looking something up even on somebody else's website that is linked back to content on your site. You do a marketing campaign, somebody blogs about you or something like that. When people are linking to your site, they're not linking to your application or your desktop site. They're linking to one single site. So why provide them two different sites? Even if you don't do, for instance, an application and you create a completely different, m.mysite.com, and it's a completely separate site. Again, now you've taken the mobile users and you've divided them up into a different camp than those who are accessing your stuff on desktop. Rather than thinking of them as likely the exact same people, just using a different device at any particular time.
Well, that especially comes into play in the world of social because, consider link sharing inside of Twitter. You might be sharing that on a desktop, but somebody else might be viewing that link on their Twitter mobile client. And if they click a link and, it takes them to the full website, well, that doesn't work. So responsive web design is going to shrink that down and make it viewable on their website. The same goes in the other direction. If you were viewing something and it was an M.dot site and you go to share that on Twitter and somebody on the desktop tries to load it up and it's all shrunken down and designed specifically for a phone, well, that's not ideal either. You want them to view the desktop experience, desktop-sized experience. And so with responsive web design, you're sharing the same link. It's just automatically catering itself to the specific device. And even, I think one thing that gets lost sometimes is it's not only the device, it's also the browser size. So, some people browse with their window maximized, but other people have a little browser window. It's off to the corner. Maybe they're working on a Word document as well. And responsive web design can actually accommodate that. So it's not just saying, okay, well, I'm running on a desktop, therefore I'm going to show this huge website. It's saying, well, I'm running on a website, but the browser window has been shrunken down a little bit, so I am going to start to shrink things like the menu structure or videos or images to accommodate that and make sure you can still view a lot of the same content in that smaller usable space.
Yeah, definitely. And, what helps your SEO, of course, beyond folks being able to access it through search engines, but being able to accumulate inbound links from sources. And if people are linking to, your page rank is going to be affected by the fact that people are your inbound links are going to potentially be split, if not really focused only on your desktop version instead of across both. So you would have to deal with search engine ranking for your mobile site in a whole different fashion because of dividing the two between each other. Also, duplicating content between completely two different places, whether it be an app or an M-dot, version of your site. This keeps you from having to maintain content in more than one area, even if it does get automatically fed into other areas. Search engines do not like that, and many of the updates that we've seen from Google will pay attention to those sorts of things. Also, decreasing the bounce rate of folks that are coming from these links, whether it be shared links or otherwise, to your site, and then they find out that it's not easy to navigate. They can't find their information because they're looking at it again on a mobile device, and so therefore they leave your site. It kind of in a way treats those folks as second-class citizens. And I think we were just talking about the fact that these are going to be predominantly the first-class citizens from now on, for one thing. So if you're not doing it soon, you're going to miss out on the folks that are going to go elsewhere to a much easier to consume site, amongst other things. Can we talk a little bit about the app thing? I mean, I think people say, well, what is really the downside of having a mobile app versus a mobile website? What are your thoughts on that, Cory?
I think one of the challenges is definitely programming for the various platforms. So right now, yes, you could argue that by programming for iOS and programming for Android, you've covered 90 to 95+% of the market. But at the same time, that doesn't take into account things like outside of the United States, it's definitely not as clear cut as that. Let's say, Windows Phone or BlackBerry, one of these other platforms takes off. We've even got Firefox launching an operating system. So if one of those operating systems started to gain market share, you'd suddenly have to either, get those skills, go out and hire somebody with those skills, versus responsive web design, it's just automatically going to adjust itself to that new platform. So I think that's definitely one of the benefits, is it's sort of future-proofing yourself. So there is a little bit more upfront cost to designing a website to be responsive versus just designing your website and saying, okay, well, now we're done. But, you do it right and you do it once, and that's going to carry forward throughout all these future devices. So I think that's a huge benefit. One of the things that apps do have on their side is that for certain things, there is some increased speed by having a lot of that data preloaded on the phone. So you can get around some of that with caching and some of that with some of these technologies that are coming out. But if it's a very specific function, a very specific thing that you're asking people to do, sometimes an application is going to be faster than that. And it also has the benefit of running regardless of if you have a active connection or not. So you can load up information into an app that maybe somebody wouldn't be able to access if for some reason they had a slow connection or, no connection at all. Maybe they're traveling internationally.
And we also talked about some numbers a show or two ago, and I wish that I remembered exactly what they were at the moment regarding conversion and such for mobile devices. Wasn't that what it was? It was talking about folks that had mobile sites, responsive websites, and how it impacted how many transactions that they had on their commerce site when people were accessing their site via mobile versus those that were accessing it via desktop, or those that were accessing a desktop version of the site on their mobile device trying to make purchases, correct?
Yeah, and that was more, I think, yes, it was put out by a company that does responsive web design, so they phrased it in terms of responsive web design. I think the takeaway from that was just that when you optimize your experience for the mobile browser, that people are going to spend more on your retail site. And so you could take advantage of that benefit through both responsive web design and a, M.dot kind of mobile optimized site. But I think what we're looking at here, as we talked about some of those other benefits of SEO and link building and removing duplicate content, that sort of thing, those are benefits of responsive web design that you're not going to get elsewhere. So, yes, you can get those same benefits of catering your experience to the mobile user a number of different ways, but responsive web design is probably going to be, it's a skill that a lot of web designers are acquiring, so it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper. You don't have to go out and find a iOS programmer who knows the ins and outs of that language. It's using a more familiar language. At the same time, it's future proofing. So, maybe this mobile M.dot optimization program you're using, it's some sort of open source code that gets abandoned in the future, and now you've got to go out and dig your content back out and reapply it to a new framework, versus responsive web design that's using HTML that's been vetted, it's been standards approved, right? It's standards approved. Yeah, so it's going to work. It works now, and it's going to work far into the future. So again, it's kind of do it once, do it right, and you're going to set yourself up for success moving forward.
Yeah, and we've been doing responsive design over the last year ourselves with our company and at Secret Sushi. And it's definitely something that we jumped on because of, like you said, the standards-based approach, where you're using all of the same things that you're normally using. You're not risking the potential of things being outdated and so on. And pretty much with any project moving forward, we really, really try to strongly push having enough extra room in the timeline and the budget and all those sorts of things for a responsive approach, because it isn't just about squishing things small. There are some considerations. And so moving forward, if you are thinking about doing this, because this is kind of why we're talking about it here. One thing is as Cory alluded to, this is something that you're going to have to do one time or another in the future. This is going to be the trend. It's just like before, where people said, well, it's great you got a brochure. It's great that you do this. It's great that you've got a business card and all this other marketing collateral. But now we have the web, and you need to create a website. And those who were laggards in creating a website eventually got it. And if you don't have a website, it's appropriate, you should have one for your business, then you are definitely falling behind. This is going to be the same thing, where it's going to be harder for folks to access your content. It's going to make things more difficult for those predominant users. And so one way or another, you're going to end up getting to the point where you need to put this site out there or convert your existing site. If you're already thinking about doing a redesign for your site, then it's a good time to think about adding responsive web design to it. Talk to your design company, talk to your design department, whoever that may be. Usually because it's using standards stuff, it's using PHP, it's using HTML and CSS and, a little bit of JavaScript here and there. It really is just about adding a little bit more time and consideration and thought to an existing design process. One site that I think I'd suggest taking a look at, just to get some examples of what it is we're talking about, because it can feel a little bit difficult to understand how it works, is a really cool site. It's pretty much kind of like a gallery of mobile or responsive sites called, the term is of the approach and technology and methodology is called media queries. And so the site is actually media queries, but instead of .com, it's basically the ES at the end is the end of the domain. So it's mediaquery.es, and you'll see a gallery of what many, many sites look like across the web that have been converted over to a responsive sites. You'll see them in their mobile version, then you'll see them in tablet, and so on. So I'm looking at it right now, and I can see the Next Web, which is a big tech site. The Time magazine, I guess they've recently converted into a responsive design, and then a bunch of other lesser known sites that are out there that have also converted themselves into responsive based sites. So I think it's a good place to take a look at examples of what people do when they take a larger version and they make it more compatible for mobile devices all the way around.
There you go. And we'll include a link to that in the show notes. We'll also include a couple of other links. So there's a great book about responsive web design from the book series called A Book Apart. So that's abookapart.com. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. There's a number of pre-built WordPress themes that are already responsive. So we are actually using one of those on the SoLoMo website. So if you go to the SoLoMoShow.com, which is also coincidentally where you can find the show notes, and you can play around with the window and notice that the SoLoMo Show website is responsive, and that's thanks to the Canvas theme from Woo Themes. So there's Canvas theme, certainly not alone. There are a number of pre-built themes that will at least get you started if you've got a blog and you're looking to make it responsive. And we'll include a couple of other links in there as well, as including a really neat program that came out from Google today to kind of show off some Chrome technologies called Super Sync Sports. It's actually a multiplayer online game that you connect your mobile phone to your computer or your tablet. You can play up to 4 people at once. It's really cool. But what's especially neat about it is how responsive the web design is. It looks really great on any size screen. You can readjust your browsers. It automatically works on your phones. You can turn your phone from portrait to landscape, and it adjusts things like the controller layout automatically. Definitely a cool one to check out. So make sure to visit SoLoMoShow.com. Check out the show notes for this episode, and we will have tons of great links in there for you to dive deep into the world of responsive web design. All right, Adam, well, you know what time it is then. The lightning round time.
We gotta. We don't rely on pre-canned effects. Everything comes natural directly
handmade.
from.
It's genuine handmade effects, made in the USA effects. So
handcrafted sound effects. I wonder if you could sell those on
sound
Etsy.
effects. I think that's what I'm going to call them.
I've been hearing that term quite a lot lately with that sort of thing. So we've got a few things going on over here this week, huh?
Yeah, yes, indeed. So speaking of artisanal, our first one talks about Burger King, which doesn't get more artisanal than that. So let's dive right in with 60 seconds on the clock. Ready and go. So the first story up today is Foursquare expanding their specials to include both Visa and Mastercard, and also the debit cards that include the Visa and Mastercard symbol. This is similar to their American Express offer, though not the same, because I think American Express is chipping in some cash, so the deals definitely aren't quite as good. The one that I mentioned at Burger King, you can spend $10 and get $1 back. Typically the American Express are something like spend 10, get 5 back, so not quite as good there, but at least interesting to see them include all of the other credit platforms. I set it up today. It was super easy. You just type in your credit card number. There's no authentication because I guess if you want to earn somebody else free money back, they don't really care. But you type in your number, you check into a place, you purchase something with that credit card, and you're automatically going to get a discount. It's cool. I like it. I hope to see it expand in the future because right now I think the only offer is that Burger King offer. All right, Adam, with 60 seconds on the clock, what's your take on Foursquare's expanded specials? Ready and go.
So it sounds like they did a little bit of a proof of concept with American Express, and although things are a little bit different, and American Express is branched off as well and is working with Twitter and Facebook in their own ways, it's interesting to see how deep they are willing to go in regards to integration with financial systems. And so rather than simply just providing deals, they're asking you to sync up your cards or to connect your cards in order to give you kind of this direct cash back at the end of every single month or whatever on your statement. So I don't know, when you said, hey, I connected my card, I went, oh yeah, I can actually do this now. If I care about anybody, if I care about Burger King, I guess it'd be interesting to see who some of the other folks are that'll motivate me or others to join in on this program and connect their data with Foursquare.
All right at the buzzer. Well done. Well-crafted point in 60 seconds or less. And with that, I will actually let you take on topic number 2 if you're ready.
Sure. Ready?
All right. Ready and go.
So Google has announced the release of their AdWords enhanced campaigns, and they're rolling it out to folks across the AdWords ecosystem. Essentially what they've done is they've made it much, much easier to granularly control ads across platforms. So we've talked about responsive design they're taking into account a few things: which device is the person on, what time of day is it, and location are the primary factors. And so instead of spending money and just doing a blanket ad, you can actually deliver a specific ad, for instance, only when your place is open. If you're at business hours, if it's after business hours, then why would you want to advertise? Or only a specific ad within 10 miles of a particular business location, or an ad that's different on a mobile device that would, for instance, have a click to call versus one that you might have on a desktop. So it's really interesting what they're doing here, and I think it follows suit with the mobile discussion we've had.
All right, 60 seconds on the clock for a response. Ready and go. When I first saw this link, I didn't really understand it, I will admit that. But then I started watching, they've got a couple sample videos, and I really started to like what they've got going on here. It's basically allowing you to vary a lot of factors in relation to things like location and time of day. And what you can do with that is really fascinating. And it's also doing it by device. So, I encourage you to watch the video. It's very subtle, but they're doing things like if you're on a mobile device and you search for a restaurant, it'll give you driving directions or it'll give you a link to call them. If you view it on your desktop, it's actually going to bring up a link to the menu and photos and more detailed information because you're not on the go and you can dive in a little deeper. It also allows you to do things like increase your bid the closer somebody is to your door. So if somebody's a block away, you might really, really want to, send that person your way. You're willing to pay a lot more than if they're 5 miles away and they've got to get in their car and drive. So really interesting stuff and definitely something you should check out if you're an AdWords user. All right, 60 seconds on the clock for our last lightning round story of the day. Ready and go. So App.net, the social media and for now Twitter competitor, but they have ambitions that are much larger than that, announced a free tier today, or more appropriately, a freemium tier. So App.net is a paid service, but they are going to allow essentially trials via free users. So you can follow a limited number of accounts, you get a limited number of storage, and then if you like the service, their hope is you'll sign up and pay for the full shebang. I do think this is a smart move for them. People have been calling for this free tier for a while. It's a way for people to preview it. It does require an invite, so it's still kind of a closed community, but it's hopefully going to grow a lot faster now, which is important for them because the first round of paid renewals comes up in about 2 months. And so if you've plunked down either the $50 or $36 for that paid account, you're going to have to make a decision in 2 months whether or not you want to plunk that same amount of cash down again. So I think it's kind of do or die time for the service. They really need to start showing benefit, and this could help them in that direction. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on the App.net freemium tier? Ready and go.
I think it sounds a little bit like desperation to me. I don't know. I think in seeing it, seeing what they're offering and those sorts of things, like, a maximum of 40 users and all that sort of thing. It's like they're trying to gain traction in order to justify what's going on. I went ahead and paid after you kind of talked. I heard your approach to what they were trying to do, and I could hear some merit to what they were trying to do. And I honestly don't use it that often. I haven't found a real big benefit to it just yet. I don't know if you have, Cory, but it's hard to justify continually paying for the service just yet. And the activity around it isn't really huge. I don't see a lot of new users coming and following me per se, like I might in other networks where there's a surge of folks like on Vine. So to me, it really seems like the desperate move to try to gain some traction.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I am in the camp that come 2 months from now when renewal time is up, I will probably not be renewing unless a drastic change happens. I'm happy to have paid and locked down my name and kind of been a part of the experiment, but for me, I'm not seeing the type of interaction that I'd want to see, which is partly my fault. I will admit that I don't put in a lot of time into it, but they haven't really made it clear what the benefits are, so I think it's going to be a struggle.
And there's a lot of people on the comment section, that are just like, oh, really? I could downgrade my account now because I'm really only following less than 40 people. So when you get that sort of reaction, I guess in the end that, again, they've plunked it down. It's kind of a Kickstarter sort of model, right? So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So Adam, you mentioned Vine, which is a great segue into our action item of the week, which is to get started on Vine. If you haven't already, it's time to get started. It's time to check it out. As Adam said, it is growing rapidly. I'm a big Vine fan. I've actually made a couple more Vines since we first talked about it. Really been trying to play around with it, fit it into my content workflow, and I find that it fits in pretty naturally, which is always a good sign. I'm not forcing myself to use it. I've seen situations and thought to myself, oh, this would actually make a good Vine. So I pull out my phone, I take a couple quick little snaps and turn it into a video and share it. And, I think it's fun. I'm seeing other people increasing the frequency of their Vine usage. So what we came across was a comprehensive and excellent guide from photojojo.com, which is sort of the photography specialist that has really catered themselves to mobile photography. They put together what they're calling the ultimate guide to Vine, including pro tips, awesome ideas, and who to follow. And I read through it and I was like, you know what? This is the ultimate guide to Vine. So rather than try to recreate the wheel, let's, share a couple of these tips and then encourage people to check out the link, which you can find in the show notes. So figured we'd run through, their kind of pro tips and then some of their ways to play, which I thought were fun, and one of which I actually got a chance to use, so we can talk about that as well. So one of the first, their actually very first Vine pro tip is auto record, which is a feature that I was unaware of. So when you first use Vine, they sort of walk you through the guide, and to take a video, you hold your thumb on the screen, and that continues shooting video as long as your thumb is pressed. But if you're going to shoot 6 seconds of video and you know ahead of time, you can actually swipe your finger on the gray progress bar, swipe it from left to right, and it'll automatically do 6 seconds and shut itself down. You don't have to keep holding your finger on the phone. That was not something.
So that's what I've been doing accidentally all these times. I swear, I've been going to record little segments and then I move my finger and it continues to record, and I'm going, why is it doing that? Am I got a big greasy finger, or what's the thing? And I guess this must be what it is. So it's a little Easter egg, I guess, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Nice little Easter egg. I think there is something to be said for a mixture of short clips. So I wouldn't just use Vine to shoot a bunch of 6 second long videos, but if you've got 6 seconds that you're going to do, it's sometimes easier to just swipe and let the phone take care of the rest than try to hold your finger on the screen. The other thing that it talked about, which I thought was really good, was preventing focus adjust. So when we first talked about Vine, I had mentioned this. This is the somewhat annoying tendency of your phone to auto focus right in the middle of shooting a Vine video. So because Vine is still early, I'm assuming they're kind of using some tricks to get around the traditional iPhone video recording mode. But as a result, the phone doesn't register that you're in the middle of recording something, so it'll actually autofocus if something comes into or out of its frame of view. And so what it said is to prevent this, number one, hold still by bracing your arms against yourself and set the phone on a ledge or use a tripod were alternatives to that. So I think, basically what they're saying is keep the phone extremely still. The easiest way to do that is to kind of lock yourself into position. So don't be moving around and trying to get animated with the phone itself. You have to kind of treat yourself as a tripod. And then, the next step from that is actually get a tripod or get a fixed object and brace the phone against that. And that'll lock the phone in place, and as long as the phone isn't moving in relation to the things around it, it should definitely reduce, if not eliminate, the autofocus that sometimes happens when it's trying to keep track of what's in the field of view.
I think a few of the things that stand out to me is, for one, PhotoJojo is a pretty awesome website when it comes to selling equipment that helps the kind of handheld Hollywood style folks. There's actual site called handheldhollywood.com that really caters to folks using things like iPhones and iPod Touches and iPads to make recordings. And so there's a lot of interlinked between all these tips here. There's a lot of reference to some of the tools that they have available to help enhance your recording with your iPhone. Things like the Glyph little tripod thing that I actually have as well. I think it's like $20, and it helps using it as a tripod. And they talk about how holding still in order to make things like stop motion animation shots look much better. So that's really cool. And then there's like a whole section here that really is helping you in a real bootstrap fashion kind of create cinematic effects and other things using, covering it with a piece of paper and so on. They showed make transitions feel a little bit more cinematic by holding something over the lens to create a black screen just before you go to the next shot, because shots can feel very abrupt between, one second shot to another 2-second shot sort of thing. And so I think paying attention to these little nifty tricks are pretty awesome, and will definitely help you step up your creativity using Vine.
Yeah, that was actually one that I sort of alluded to that I had a chance to play with. So it's under their 10 ways to play with Vine section, which once you get past the basics, this is really the fun part of this post. It's talking about a lot of things that I myself hadn't yet run across, some fun ways to play with it. So what it said is open and close the shutter. Basically, if you hold your finger over the lens, it will automatically increase the sensitivity as high as it can get because it thinks it's in a pitch black room. And so if you start your Vine and then instantly remove your finger, it's actually going to create this really interesting fade effect where it goes from stark white or all black and actually fades into view. So a weekend or two ago, I was at the Monster Truck Rally race over in Oakland and taking some video of the monster truck, and I happened to be trying this sort of open and close the shutter. I had my finger over the lens, and this monster truck crashes right in front of me, and so I take my finger off, and it looks, if you watch the Vine video, this truck kind of jumps up in the air, and then it lands, and then it almost looks like there's this huge explosion, and then the next thing you see is this truck, wheels up, spinning in the air, partly on fire. So that was kind of a cool effect, and it was something that I hadn't heard of before reading this Photo Jojo article, so I thought that was cool. They also mention not making a boring slideshow, so nobody wants to see your vacation photos just presented one after another, but they have this cool example video where it's somebody actually holding printed photos and then taking a Vine video of those photos to turn it into a looping slideshow. And it has a really cool, like we were saying, a handmade effect to it. It's really interesting and adds some intrigue to what otherwise might be, just a collection of 6 or 7 boring vacation photos. So overall, some really cool stuff here. Make sure to check out the link in the show notes, read through it, and if you're already a Vine user, or if you're a new Vine user looking to get up to speed and learn some of the tricks of the trade, this is a go-to and will probably become a great reference for you. And then finally, they include 10 awesome people to follow. The challenge with this is you've got to actually search for these people inside the app because you cannot yet follow accounts online the way that Instagram is enabled. So that was a little frustrating. I will admit to having not really followed a lot of these accounts just because it's so tricky to actually do it. I'm hoping that soon they will allow you to follow accounts online. But if you're looking for some inspiration, definitely check those out. They say 10. There's actually 12 that they include. So a lot of good stuff there, a lot of inspirational users that are doing some interesting things, and I'm guessing a lot of these tips were pulled from those accounts, so definitely check that out.
So it's time for the wrap, huh?
Yes, indeed. Time to wrap it up. So, as always, we covered a lot of great stuff today, hit a variety of topics, some really fun things, and this episode especially, there's going to be a lot more to dive into. So, we encourage you to check out the show notes. Those are going to be available SoLoMoShow.com. Each episode gets its own post, and we include a bunch of links there, including some links that maybe we didn't get a chance to mention on the show, but are good for diving deeper into those topics. So we encourage you to check that out. And if after having done so, maybe you've got some questions on the topics we covered, or maybe you want to give us feedback on the way that we covered something, make a suggestion for next week's topic, or even if you just want to say hi, we definitely encourage you to do that. We love to get in touch with our audience. So there's a number of ways you can do that. The easiest is via Twitter. We're both available at SoLoMo Show, or you can reach myself directly. I'm at Cory O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us directly if you have a show idea or something else you want to share with us. Again, if you just want to say hi, our email is SoLoMoShow, SoLoMoShow @gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page where we share things intermittently throughout the week, a Google Plus page, and we have a Pinterest account where we have a number of boards there, and we have many of our episodes there because you can share YouTube videos on Pinterest. And so you can go ahead and collect those and repin those to your heart's delight.
There you go. And if you missed any of the links that we just mentioned, those too can be found in the show notes. So again, just hop over to SoLoMoShow.com or if you look around in your podcast player of choice, there should be an option to view the show notes. Both of those will take you to the treasure trove of information that we include with each episode. And with that, we will call this one a wrap, but we do hope that you come back next week for another episode of the SoLoMo Show.
Take care.